One of the things that I've observed that always gives me actually pain is when I hear people describe teenagers and describe them as if they're crazy and bad and just hold your breath while they get through this phase. Don't worry. Parents start talking about that when their kids are 3 and 4. They start worrying about when their kids become teenagers. And it is true that those are some challenging times for parents. But what do you say about attachment and about allowing a child to be their full person during that phase? What's the importance of that, and how do we do that?
Well, there is a greater load on the teenage brain. Consciousness comes largely developmentally in 3 parts. A second part, the lights go on about 5 years of age, but there's still huge limits in terms of the amount of consciousness. It's really not hypothetical. It's really not reflective fully until puberty, and what happens is the amount at puberty that becomes accessible to consciousness means that there's all this raw material to integrate, to be able to pair up and to be in the middle of. And so you get an impulsiveness post-pubescent for about a couple of years that looks very much like a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, just because of the load on the brain. It's not that they're regressing, but if there is room for, if the bottom line is not behavior, if the bottom line is really the relationship, I'm able to communicate to that adolescent, that invitation to exist in my presence despite the problems with attitude, behavior, and so on, and I can really, the relationship is the bottom line. Given that containment, there's a lot more room for the child, for the adolescent, to be able to come in the middle of their mixed feelings. And boy, does it make a big difference if there is a couple of years of work of prefrontal cortex growth, especially prepubescent. You see the fruit of that really beginning to emerge in the 15 and 16 and 17-year-old. However, if it doesn't get to do that work, you get this huge pendulum swing, this polarized reactions, black and white thinking that can last for a lifetime.
This is where the parent comes into it, because the parent has to make room for those fluctuations and that impulsivity and that acting out. Now, what happens to us is, number one, we feel threatened at this point. And sometimes kids are far more intellectually capable than they are emotionally capable.
Yes, absolutely.
Then we engage with their intellects, and we think they should be able to understand all this stuff. And then there's a huge gap between their intellectual level.
Well, if you knew better, you should be able to behave better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is true for ourselves too, but we don't look at that too closely. So we feel threatened, and we feel upset, and then we want to fix it or control it. Secondly, parents are stressed, and this is where, if there's grandparents around who've seen this all before, and they have a tolerant attitude towards it, they can act as a buffer. But again, we tend to parent in an isolated fashion, and in a very stressed kind of fashion. So there just isn't a container.